Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And it's good to see you all here this morning. So today I would like to introduce a Buddhist writing that is attributed to Shantideva. Now, let me explain a bit first. Shantideva's writing is especially revered in the Tibetan tradition. Not so much mentioned in the Zen tradition, although it is entirely compatible, I think. Previously, we looked at the Lotus Sutra, which was composed in the form of a sutra, a teaching of the Buddha directly. And in it, the Buddha was directly quoted. And scenes in which the Buddha was said to appear were described. But this work is different. It's more an instructional manual. And the composer is the writer, is not opaque. There was an individual, Shantideva, who lived in India the end of the 7th and to the middle of the 8th century. There's a lot about Shantideva we don't know about his life. There are a lot of stories that are likely apocryphal, and I won't go over all of those. But what we do know is that he was likely born on the western coast of India in an area near present-day Pakistan. And we know that he studied at Nalanda University. Nalanda University was a great center of learning in the 8th century. It reportedly had 9 million volumes of text and thousands of scholars, like the largest universities of today. And it existed between about I believe about the 7th century up until the 12th century, at which point it was burned by some warlord coming from the Northwest. And many of the scholars were killed. But when Shantideva was there, it was a thriving educational facility, focusing on Buddhist text. The work I'm going to be talking about was purportedly written by Shantideva while he was at Nalanda. And the name of this text is the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which is often translated as a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, a guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. It's divided into 10 chapters. It's not terribly long, but it includes about 1,000 stanzas, 1,000 verses of 4 lines each. And it's written in the form of a poem. Some of the poetics is lost to us because it was written in Sanskrit, and of course we're reading it in English. It was early on translated into Tibetan, and many of the English translations are actually based on the Tibetan, although some of them are based on the original Sanskrit. So Shantideva wanted to share his understanding of how to proceed along the Bodhisattva path. So what is a Bodhisattva? Literally, it's a Sanskrit word meaning awakening being, sattva, being, bodhi, awakening or awake. And it refers to an archetype in the Mahayana tradition of someone who is dedicated to awakening, becoming a Buddha, not only for his or her own sake, but especially for the benefit of all beings, so that that awakening may be offered to others in the form of speech and conduct, actions, in the form of just presence. So Shantideva is talking about trying to develop that attitude, that approach to life, that way of life. The Bodhisattva vows, many of you are familiar with. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. And the Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Gives you a taste of what the Bodhisattva path is about. And the first chapter of this book by Shantideva is dedicated to a discussion of the benefits of bodhicitta, bodhicitta. Bodhi, of course, awakening. And citta is often translated into English as mind. But as is the case with many translations, it's an incomplete, not wholly adequate translation, because it also includes a sense of intention, and not just of mind, but of heart-mind. It might be called an attitude of awakening. Bodhicitta. And this first chapter, which is relatively short, is a motivational chapter about perhaps why people should be interested in this. And Shantideva starts off humbly in this manner. He says, "Here I shall explain how to engage in the vows of the Buddha's children, the meaning of which I have condensed in accordance with the scriptures. There is nothing here that has not been explained before. And I have no skill in the art of rhetoric. Therefore, lacking any intention to benefit others, I write this in order to acquaint it to my mind. For due to acquaintance with what is wholesome, the force of my faith may, for a short while anyway, increase because of these words. If, however, these words are seen by others equal in fortune to myself, it may be meaningful for them as well." He goes on, leisure and endowment are very hard to find. And since they accomplish what is meaningful for humanity, if I do not take advantage of them now, how will such a perfect opportunity come again? Just as a flash of lightning on a dark, cloudy night, for an instant brilliantly illuminates all, likewise, in this world, through the might of Buddha, a wholesome thought rarely and briefly appears. Virtue is perpetually feeble, the great strength of immorality being extremely intense, and except for a fully awakened mind, by what other virtue will it be overcome? So the emphasis here is on taking advantage of what is translated here as leisure. It's referring to just discretionary time, time not devoted wholly to just the means of survival. Having accomplished the task of having food and shelter, and having the opportunity to think of other things, to delve into other things, to engage in other things. How do we best use that time? Because it is a rare thing and it is brief. So there's motivation here to pay attention to what Shantideva has to say. He goes on to talk about this awakening mind. It should be understood, he says, to be of two types. The mind that aspires to awaken and the mind that ventures to do so, and is understood by this distinction between aspiring and to go and actually going. So the wise understand in turn the distinction between these two. Although great fruits occur in cyclic existence from the mind that aspires to awaken, an uninterrupted flow of virtue does not ensue as it does with the venturing mind. And for those who have perfectly seized this mind with the thought of never to turn away from totally liberating the infinite forms of life, from time to time, even while asleep or unconcerned, a force of virtue equal to the sky will perpetually ensue. He compares this to, in a sense, those who may be interested in looking at travel videos or reading a book about Spain, to those who actually go to Spain, who actually experience Spain and live there. So the thought of awakening for the benefit of all beings can occur to one just as a spark might occur. But when the spark takes fire, then there is the Bodhisattva path. For those who are deprived of happiness and burdened with many sorrows, it satisfies them with all joys and dispels all suffering. He's trying to say that bodhicitta, especially bodhicitta that takes fire, that turns into an ongoing aspiration, dispels all suffering for the individual. But it's important that that not be the sole intent, to dispel one's own suffering, but the actual intent to dispel suffering for all beings, for others, is what dispels suffering for oneself. And he concludes the chapter, I bow down to the body of those in whom the sacred, precious mind of bodhicitta is born. I seek refuge in that source of joy, who brings happiness even to those who bring harm, who brings happiness even to those who bring harm. So I was listening to the radio in the car the other evening, and there was the program of Anne Strainchamp, to the best of our knowledge, and she was talking about hope. Hope. She was going to do a 3-part series. This was the first of the series, I think. And she was discussing hope. And one of the people that she spoke with and spoke about was a religion professor from Brown University named Andre Willis. And Andre Willis talks about deep hope. And I was trying to understand what he meant. So I listened to it on the radio and I had a partial understanding, but I went back and looked at the transcript of the program and studied it a bit more. And I'd like to read just a short section from that transcript. A deep hope might be as simple as forms of togetherness. That is, people and communities coming together. Whether they can improve the situation or not is not the question. It's the togetherness itself. It's not future-directed or future-oriented. It's not engaged with a kind of probability question about what's coming later, but it's fully present. Martin Luther King Jr., he says, provides a key example of how hope has been cheapened in our cultural memory. The words of his "I Have a Dream" speech, pardon me, are so synonymous with hope and optimism that it's been deployed in advertising to evoke those feelings toward Dodge trucks. If you've seen that ad, it's truly, well, remarkable. Less often heard is his unfulfilled dreams speech, which he delivered to crowds several times to talk through the reality that he wouldn't see that optimistic vision of America in his lifetime. What Martin described in that sermon was that his dreams were not going to come true, that his project ultimately was going to fail, and that it had fallen short. But he knew he was not to be judged by what his hopes were and how they were not reached, but by the quality of and the depth of commitment to himself and others in his community, in his own heart. So that's what I think about as a kind of deep hope. Professor Willis referred to a particular speech of Dr. King's that he gave in 1968 to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And this was just a few months before he was assassinated in Memphis. And Dr. King said, "In our individual lives, we all too often distill our frustrations with an essence of bitterness, or drown ourselves in the deep waters of self-pity, or adopt a fatalistic philosophy that whatever happens must happen, that all events are determined by necessity. These reactions poison the soul and scar the personality. The only healthy answer is one's honest recognition of disappointment, that as he or she clings to fragments of hope, the acceptance of finite disappointment while clinging to infinite hope. Even as he clings to fragments of hope, the acceptance of finite disappointment is infinite hope." I've decided that on this question of nonviolence, for instance, I'm going to stand by it. I'm going to love because it's just lovely to love. I'm going to be nonviolent because I believe it is the answer to mankind's problems. I'm not going to bargain with reality, but I'm going to stand by nonviolence in spite of. And so I say to you that I've taken a vow. I, Martin Luther King, take thee, nonviolence, to be my wedded wife, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer. This isn't a bargaining experience. For richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I'm going on in the faiths and with that determination. So to me, bodhicitta, adoption of the Bodhisattva way of life, bears some similarity to what Professor Willis was talking about and describing as deep hope. And bodhicitta, just that moment of aspiration that one might have from time to time, is the spark that lights the fire. So we'll be talking about this work of Shantideva for the next few weeks and trying to understand what he, in the 8th century India, had on his mind when he was talking about the Bodhisattva path. So we'll stop there. And maybe if during the small groups, you can think about, well, what is this bodhicitta? Do I experience this? Is this something that's really tangible to me? And how is it related to hope, if it is at all? And what sort of hope is it?
Hey, well, question. How do you spell Shantideva?
Oh boy. Shantideva? Shantideva. Okay, it's spelled in two different ways, but the most common way is Shatideva. Shantideva. It means Shanti is like peace, and Deva is exalted one or Lord. So like the Lord of Peace is what his name means. Shantideva.
Last name spelling again?
Uh,
TVE.
Shantideva. I hope I got that right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for listening today and for being here, sharing, and we'll get back together in a few moments and now go into some breakout rooms.
Mhm.